All right, here we are. Night time talk. I should say let's talk. It's nighttime. Let's talk. Uh, okay, I'm going to put this on live here really quick. On Instagram, I should say, because who knows? Maybe there's someone who comes in here from Instagram. I don't know. We're here. Anyways, yeah, let's just give it a second. I don't know. Might as well. There's a couple people who are going to join us here on live. Oops. How do I set this up? I guess I can just rest my hand down here. But yeah, happy Sunday, everyone. I've got a couple things that I've been thinking about bringing up, sharing stuff that I'm on my mind, so on and so forth. Oh, by the way, if on Instagram, I should share the link from Instagram to what's it called? To this stream. This is where we're at here. Share. Where's that? Let me grab that link. I think I shared last time too that I really like the Happy Sunday, Zaid. I really like the fact that you can have you can copy and paste a link from a desktop computer to your phone. So I just did that. I dropped the link in the Instagram. So because that's where we're at. We're on YouTube. We're on YouTube over here. Let me see if there's any other way I can. Anyways, yeah, I'll share that link on my YouTube. Sorry, on my story right now. By the way, I should think through these things a little bit more. Maybe I wonder. Anyways, okay, we'll be back. We'll be back here. And now, discard. It's so complicated. Technology is complicated. Okay. Click. Cool. Anyways, all right. I can only do one thing at a time, y'all. I am a man. I have a man brain. And I think part of that comes with I have one box. I have one box that I can occupy at a time. Sometimes there is a nothing box. And sometimes that box is occupied by trying to do this podcast thing. So, anyways, cool. Givers versus takers. I've been thinking about some things that have reoccurred, themes that have sort of reoccurred in my life recently. And this whole idea of people kind of being on a continuum. There's a kind of a spectrum, right, between people who have this attitude of take, versus people that have this attitude of, my life is about giving, right? Or my life is about what is it that I can give versus what it is that I can get out of things, right? And I was thinking about this most recently because I was in the gym today. I was doing a barbell session with my affiliate CrossFit The Neighborhood here in Old Town Alexandria, and I was with a partner on the rig, and I was very grateful to him because he was counting down the tempo, like how long I was supposed to be kind of sitting at the bottom of the squat. And I was super grateful to him because he was very clear and kind of saying, okay, I have 10 seconds to go, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 kind of thing. Okay, get out of the tension. So get out of that bottom squat. And I caught myself halfway through. I was like, holy crap. I am totally, as soon as my set's done, I'm like wandering the gym, just kind of like minding my own business, kind of in my own world, right? Basically, right? And I was kind of thinking like, wait, like what if, granted we were kind of lucky because we had the clock right in front of us. So there was part of me that was maybe in the back of my head, like, okay, I don't need to kind of sit here and count it down for him. but I appreciated the fact that he had counted down for me. And so, and here I was kind of not even really thinking about it at all. And I thought, oh, I'm, like, what am I doing? Um, like, why don't I kind of get involved in this situation? Why don't I get more active in helping this person who I think is cool? He's a cool guy. I enjoyed working out with him. And so I, like, okay, kind of set myself, I had kind of to readjust, long story short, right? I had to kind of readjust into the kind of more, okay, I'm going from this mindset of like taking and being grateful. I mean, being grateful is, I think, part of that, right? Being rather than being more of a giver than a taker or something like that, right? And but I think there was a next step for me, right? And so it's kind of good for me to kind of discover that next step, which was, hey, um, maybe he would appreciate me counting down for him too, right? So that's kind of what I did. I try to do that for him. So, anyways, but that's been sort of a theme. Something's been thinking that I've been thinking about, right? Um, you know, like another thing that's kind of keyed off this theme, right, is a friend of mine just had his first child, which is super exciting. I was super excited for him and his wife. And I just saw the baby came kind of unexpectedly, or kind of earlier than expected. Everything's great. Everything's fine. And I was thinking about all my friends who are married, and I have a couple friends have 4 or 5 kids, so quite a bit of kids, and they're young. They're my age. They're in their early 30s at the oldest end of the spectrum there. And I mean, could you just talk about like a situation that makes you forget about yourself, forces you almost to be kind of more in that mindset of giving rather than taking. I mean, think about it. You have like helpless children, helpless babies, many of them, several of them, 4 or 5, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I mean, heck, yeah, even one, right? You have to kind of shift that whole mindset into, okay, my life is about giving right now. Is much more about giving than it is about taking here, right? It just kind of has to be, and I think that's really healthy and that's really great for them, right? Um, but it also kind of leads me to think, and I think it could lead other people to think this too, not just me, but other people who are single in their 30s, or older or younger, um, about, and maybe if someone who's in their 20s might not kind of recognize this, but um, hey, I think there's always going to be this moment necessarily where you kind of sit back and you can sit back and think, what have I done, right? What has kind of prompted me to kind of live in that mindset of, in my life, is what's my life about? Is my life primarily about receiving things, about being the recipient of things, consuming things, or is it about something about producing things, about helping people? Um, and that can take a million types of forms, right? And I was thinking, I think that helps to frame stuff in life a little bit more meaningfully too, is my hot take, right? Um, so I might not have 5 kids, but I have a lot of kind of interesting life experiences, even at 32, that I think are cool and interesting and worthy of sharing, right? Um, Gosh, like, I don't know. I went to UCLA. I went from out of college, sorry, out of high school to UCLA, and that was a completely different experience living in a huge city like that. I was thinking I was going to go to law school, and then I went down that path and I started applying to law schools. I got into a bunch of law schools. I decided not to do that, and partially because I was working with a lawyer who had a bunch of who's a criminal defense attorney, but I did not have a good experience working with him, and partially kind of helped me to decide, okay, this is not for me. And there's a whole bunch of stories kind of associated with that too, right? Um, there's a girl I dated who in when I was living in LA, whose mom got sick with cancer and died a couple months later. That was kind of another experience. I decided to kind of go live in an RV for a little while when I was living in LA, and I had a bunch of kind of stories about that. Um, you know, what happened? Then I started working in Chicago. I worked for a all boys Catholic school in Chicago, which I really enjoyed, and learned a ton about marketing. Oh, and before that, I was working in a startup, and then I was working in LA. This is all in LA. I was working in a startup that failed ultimately. Then I worked at a what's it called, the jazz club, and I was doing marketing there. I started doing marketing there. And anyways, I mean, I could go on and on, right? I think there's lots of things, right? And I think sorry, let me just make sure there's nothing coming in on my Instagram. Okay, good. And I think a lot of people who have kind of been around in their 30s have sort of those sorts of experiences. But the point is, I think for me that I was thinking, reflecting on, like, in how many of those experiences and how many of those stories that I have was I seeking to be more primarily uh, working with intentions of giving rather than taking, right? Um, and honestly, I think in general, that's mostly things about giving, right? I think I have recognized that over the years. Uh, and it also kind of reminds me too of this story of all the stuff that people talk about CrossFit Games athletes without who sort of see affiliates in the communities that they are part of as places where they kind of take, right? Rather than kind of seeing themselves as the fruits of the methodology of CrossFit, of the local affiliates, the gyms, the small businesses that kind of sustain them in the community and the people that are there. I was talking to someone in the gym who had stories about that, right? And she was kind of telling me about how her own personal experiences dealing with this sort of attitudes, I guess you could say. And which again, I think my conscience was pricked, right? Because that attitude of like, oh, I'm good. Like I got my rep, I got my set in. I'm gonna go walk around, shoot the shit with someone, do whatever I want, not really kind of considering, hey, my partner kind of needs me, right? Am I being a good partner right now? No, not really. Um, but there's time to correct that, right? So, um, another thing that I was thinking about, which is that I think living with people is a huge benefit, regardless of whether they're family or roommates. And I live, and I say this as someone who lives alone currently. So maybe this is not. I don't come from the place of the greatest authority in this, but I do have a lot of cool experiences living with people. It's and being very deliberate too about cultivating sort of a family life with people. That family life is something that, again, like similar to having that attitude of being a father or having children, kind of forces you to have that mentality of I'm for the others, right? I'm not here necessarily for my own pleasure. I'm not here to kind of take as a recipient or as a consumer or something like that, but I'm actually producing something. I'm helping people. And that's super important, right? There was a friend of mine who's married, and I was over at the house for dinner a few months ago, and she was talking about she had a sister lives in my neighborhood, which is Alexandria, Virginia, which is a fairly wealthy, like well-to-do community. Like this area is pretty uh, expensive, and there's a lot of really nice houses, and people are fairly wealthy and well off here in this kind of particular neighborhood. And which is cool. I mean, nothing against that, right? Necessarily in and of itself. I'm not really one of those people, but I don't think I'd consider myself like that wealthy. I'm renting a studio apartment for way more than I should. But I what was I going to say? Oh yeah, so the friend, she was talking about her sister's experiences in dating, and how the sister had complained a lot with dating men in this area. Um, Good men from her Catholic church community, right? Who in general, by and large, like these are not schmucks. They're not a-holes. They're, upstanding people in general. And a lot of the attitudes, and anyways, I don't know how to I was asking her about like what it was about these guys that was not good. And what did she say? She was like, well, they kind of live by themselves in their own like bubble, that they never seek to kind of like contribute. They're kind of all about like, I mean, in essence, like they're all kind of about what they can get out of situations, right? Um and they're kind of, I don't know if I don't have. I'm kind of failing the words right now, but they're kind of like pampered. They're sort of spoiled and kind of like, well, um, good things will come to me. I don't have to do anything. I don't have to put an effort forth. I don't have to work hard um, for in this. I guess in this dating context. And I was again like in that moment I was kind of stung, or I had this kind of mentality of like, um, they're all kind of in their little Alexandria life, living their own little Alexandria rich person, life where everything's kind of given to them on a silver platter. And I was kind of, what's it called? I was kind of, my conscience was pricked again by that, because I said, well, I live alone. I have like a big boy job that pays me a decent amount of money. Uh, you know, like, am I one of these guys? Like, am I actually kind of like that too? Um, I think I even said something like that to her in the moment. I was like, I'm trying to kind of have this attitude where I don't live by myself for myself, kind of to see how much I can receive from others, right? Or seeing myself as someone who's only a recipient, or someone who's capable of only kind of receiving and not really of giving either. And I guess that's kind of the, as I'm talking about it, it makes me think, that's a good way of thinking about it, right? It's not that these people or myself, right, have this ill will or something, right? Sometimes it's more that they just are a little bit incapable of giving. There's a little bit of a lack of freedom. There's a sort of like slavery to comforts or familiarity, and don't get me wrong, I think like routines and your comforts and your health and all those things are very good and important. I mean, what the heck, like, I'm all about fitness. I think fitness is a great, wonderful thing. But I think there's also kind of like a perversion of it, right? There's kind of a idolization of it potentially that can happen. And I guess another reason that I'm thinking about this stuff is that I went on a date recently with a girl she's here in Old Town, um, and she's super nice. I had a great conversation. I really enjoyed kind of meeting her, and and yeah, I think I got ghosted. I got ghosted by her, and a couple of days later, I was expecting to hear back. I never heard back. Um, and there's the kind of, you could take the attitude of like, oh, well, that's messed up, or like F her. That was like so bad. But it's also kind of like there's a lot of like incapacity. I think for whatever reason, I mean, I don't know, mental health is one that I think I've run into with women, right? Where they're overwhelmed, they're anxious, there's constantly something kind of going wrong in their life that is causing them but despite their best intentions or will, or to be kind of incapable of thinking about what other people want or what other people need. Um, I mean, and not necessarily to say that that's what kind of was going on with this girl, but she kind of had that, she kind of fit that demographic. She kind of fit that kind of profile of super great professional uh, achievements, status, job, live by herself in a wealthy, well-to-do neighborhood, takes care of herself, and her dog, which is good. But like maybe there's like a block. I don't know. I don't know what's going on in her life. I don't know why she never responded back. Um, it's fine. You know, I wish her the best. I don't think she's gonna watch this, but just in case you're wondering, just in case you're watching, I had a great time. Um, gosh, okay, yeah. So, let's see. We're at 19 minutes. I wanted to kind of finish, and this is maybe not just a super short activity or thought, but one thing I wanted to share, something that I've found super helpful for me personally, at least, and that's this tool called Optimal Work. And I don't know, I mean, maybe there's people who are watching this who are very familiar and are kind of sick of someone talking about Optimal Work, but it does get a lot of traction in the kind of among, I guess you could say my friend group. Where is it? Yeah, here it is. And so this was developed by Optimal Work was developed by not sociologist, a psychologist, a psychiatrist, I should say, who does have his own personal private practice, by the way, but he's a psychiatrist in the medical school at Harvard, and so he's a fairly respected professional. He has a lot of kind of cool accomplishments, but he partnered with a friend of his to kind of create this tool, Optimal Work, that takes some of the stuff, research, the cognitive behavioral therapy sort of research and best practices that he's found in his own kind of practice, and apply to them to work. And so the work, your work is basically the frame of reference, I guess, is this idea that your work is the stage for you to perform, yes, to kind of get results, to achieve things, and to produce an outcome, right? Necessarily, but there's also kind of this dimension of work as a means for me to grow in virtues, ideals, character traits, skills, stuff like that, and relationships too. So it's kind of like trying to orient work in a little bit more of a healthy context, I guess you could say. And anyways, there's a bunch of tools on it, optimalwork.com. I do suggest you kind of go out there, but go on that, check it out. But if you haven't, if you don't already, but I wanted to kind of look at the what's it called? One of the tools that I've found transformative, I think, when I first started kind of thinking about some of these things, or trying to think more deep thoughts, right? And this does, I think this, all this stuff can relate to CrossFit as a kind of work, right? So I think it's worth, I think, and it's not just necessarily for people who kind of have a desk job or who are kind of quote knowledge workers, you could say, but it's also people who are anyone who does any kind of work. I mean, in a way, including CrossFit. But basically, this tool. There's a bunch of different things that they have going on here, but I wanted to kind of spend some time doing this true success because it kind of gets back to this theme of. Oh, let me change the thing. Yeah, okay. It kind of gets back to this theme of. What was I going to say? It gets back to this theme of the continuum of being a giver versus a taker, right? Yeah. Okay. Cool. Oh, sorry. Okay. Yeah. So it kind of gets to this theme of being a giver versus a taker. And I'll just go through it really quick. So I thought I'd kind of do a little walkthrough, give some thoughts as I go, in case you kind of want to try it for the last kind of session here, or part of the section here. True success. So I think this kind of, again, like it's like, what are you measuring as success? What does this success mean to you, right? Let's start by clarifying what life looked like when the time when you're feeling it most overwhelmed and unhappy. Okay, so there's a sort of, I think there's a certain personality and a certain kind of desire to be super honest with yourself, that I think is super helpful. And I'm thinking, I think this was super impactful for me because I like went back to like some like dark stuff, some dark times. And I was like, okay, what was I like? What was I like? What was it like? What was life looking like, right? For me when it was in those, dark times, right? What was I doing when I was anxious, right? And you can kind of choose to, right? I don't know. I was avoiding the person that bothered me a lot, and I was sort of dreading having to go to work because that was when I was going to see that person, right? For example, I mean, this is hypothetically speaking, I think, right? How are you treating others when you are anxious? Okay, so again, if you have roommates, if you live with people, this is kind of a lot more easy, right? Okay, let me just think. I guess I was, um, I'd get super upset about them not like cleaning the dishes, so I'm kind of controlling, and then they'd, you know, what's it called? I tried to kind of make a bunch of rules about like when you clean the kitchen and how you do it, and put the passive aggressive notes around, kind of that kind of attitude, right? How are you responding to stress? Okay, I was responding to stress. I mean, I was distracting. I just kind of spent all my time on Instagram and YouTube, and then I would complain. Like every time that I was talking to someone, every time I'd open my mouth, they walk in the room. I'm like, oh my gosh, can you believe blah blah blah? This thing happened. You know, how were you responding when others angered or annoyed you? Well, I was, I don't know. I would snap when those dishes were never done, right? And then I was also, I think, really negatively about them. So I'd kind of resent them for the um, personal offense that I took at them not doing the dishes or doing when I was sad. I don't know. Let's see. Regretting not choosing better roommates. I don't know. You have to add another one. Anyway, so it kind of summarizes here kind of what's going on. Escaping challenge. You see how all of these behaviors go together. They're ways of escaping something that's challenging you. They promise relief in the moment, that they end up undermining your ability to work well and connect with others. When we're most overwhelmed, we can be like a person with a pit and a shovel. We have to do something, so we dig. Right? Okay, so all these things, when you think about it, have to do with kind of not really dealing with the real issue, right? What's the real challenge here? I'm trying to escape it, right? It's easy to think if our situation were better, if only I had a better job, if only I was less busy, then I'd be happy, and I'd stop doing these negative things. But again, that's kind of, I mean, I think, and this is fairly obvious, right? Like that's kind of a dead end, right? No matter what we might be able to attain, that sense of meaning is just going to be out of reach. I guess that's sort of like what you think about like conditional thinking. If I had a better job, if I just fixed, if I just, I don't know, what's the example? If I had a better job, if I was less busy, if I had more free time, then I would be able to do actually what I really want to do. Those are all conditions. I only can do what I really want to do, which is deal with the real issues, if my conditions in my life are perfect. Okay, so clarifying what your life is like when it's best is a good starting point for change. Cool. Imagine some years, and now this is kind of like this is sort of like one of the more valuable nuggets, I think, this whole kind of second sequence, which I think is super valuable, right? And this is something that Kevin Majors, the guy who founded Optimal Work, really recommended people do, to kind of clarify those ideals, clarify what's really most meaningful to them in their life, right? And it's this kind of thought experiment. So imagine some years from now, you're happily married and you overhear your spouse in the other room talking talking to someone who doesn't know you. You hear that they're talking about you, in fact, bragging about you and how well you treat them. What would it make? What would it make you most happy to hear your spouse say about the way you treat them? I don't like the way that's written. It should say something like, what would make you the happiest to hear your spouse saying? Anyways, okay. Okay, well, what would it be like if when that person's showing affection, when you're showing affection for her, right? It's really warm. He's really warm with me, and then he's always has a smile on his face. He's very cheerful. Okay. And again, like this is just for sake of an example, I'm not giving any kind of personal revealing. Well, maybe I'm a little bit, but what would it like when you put them first? What's it like for her when you put her first? Well, he's, you overhear her saying, well, he's super thoughtful and he's just 100% available. He's like, whatever I need, whenever he calls me or whenever I call him, he's there, right? And he's there with a thoughtful nature, right? Okay, what was he like in times of discord? Well, he's super forgiving no matter what happens. There's always like a way that he kind of reconciles, and patient, right? Whatever happens, there's nothing that can kind of get him down or lose confidence that I'm, loved or cared for by him, right? What would they say that you're like when they need to depend on you? He's super reliable, right? I don't know. Anything that I need is there with him. I can always depend on him. He's super reliable. What would they say you're like when you're trying to help them grow? I always can respond. I always get like super wise advice from him, right? Okay, assuming that these are, again, just to kind of reiterate, these are all things that, for example, would make me, as the user of this optimal work tool, super happy to hear my spouse saying about me, right? Would you like to add another one? Again, and then there's this kind of, these each of these are an ideal that you can always aim for but never exhaust. And this is kind of an interesting thing to contrast with fitness and like exercise and all that stuff, because what's it called? So, and this is kind of like an interesting, I don't know, interesting thing to think about. You can always be more fit, and there's sort of a uh, um, there's sort of like a parallel, and I've heard them say how fitness is one of these that's kind of like a pseudo ideal. It's not like a real ideal, and I think there's multiple reasons for that. But basically, there's this ideal that you can always be more patient, you can always be more cheerful, you can always be more kind, and yeah, to some extent, you can always be more fit. But I think, I mean, and I just thought of another reason. This is maybe not. This doesn't necessarily apply to fitness necessarily. Um, um, but I think one of the facts is that time always goes on and we always get older. And the measures, the markers of our fitness have a tendency to kind of go away after time, right? So there's a way that it's very fleeting, right? I can't be kind of performing at the same level as I am when I'm 32 as when I'm 55, right? It's just not going to happen, right? Whereas all these things, I can start to becoming more wise or reliable now as a man, and I can continue to grow in my ability to be reliable or patient, um, infinity to infinity time, right? Um, what was I going to say? This is what true success looks like. This is according to optimal work, and I think there's something really powerful to it, right? And again, okay, here's this continuum that I was kind of mentioning, right? On the left hand, so there's this kind of attitude of I just want to kind of get through the challenges. I want to escape the things that are scary or bad or uncomfortable, um, aka I'm not getting what I want, right? Or I can see my life more about what it is to give rather than to what it is to get, right? And so there's kind of a continuum. We're never like necessarily perfect. I'm not, going to be able to completely achieve the wisdom of the most infinitely wise person you could possibly imagine in your life, in the life that I have here. But anyways, okay. Isn't there a stark contrast between these two lives? There's a continuum from one to the other, blah, blah, blah. You get it. In the last week, which way is that going? So it kind of like helps you select kind of where you're at, change. And now lastly, I think this is the most important part, and at least for me personally, and why this tool was super transformative when I first started working with it, in terms of mindset and just personal growth and everything like that. And this again goes beyond just the gym. It goes into the gym, it goes into my professional life, it goes into my personal life, into my social life, friendships, relationships, everything like that, family, everything. Are you ready to make a change and pursuing true success in this very moment? And I remember kind of making this resolution and writing it down. And there's a ton of really amazing, beautiful things in my life that have happened since that one little thing that I decided to do back in 2019 or whenever, when I first started enjoying kind of using this tool, Optimal Work. And again, like I think this idea of doing something so loving for someone that it surprises them is pretty powerful when you think about it, right? I want to do something that is so like, yeah, like just like that's a great way of thinking about it. Like what would be super, like if I'm, I don't know, thinking about my girlfriend or my non-existent girlfriend. I don't know. I can't think of anyone right now. Whoever you think about, whoever is closest to you in your relationship, what would it be super like? What would it be like to like surprise them with how much I love them? And like, and I it could take all kinds of different forms, right? This is kind of that creativity. I'll just put something, that creativity of love, right? We'll email a reminder. Keep in mind your actions. It's your actions that count. It's kind of like, what am I putting into it? Not so much what am I getting out, right? If they don't give you the response that you might hope for, that's okay, right? Because I'm not doing something just so that I can get something nice in return here in this case, right? Are you feeling on board but wondering what this has to do with work? Okay, this is also super cool. Just as we focus on being the most loving in our lives, at work, we focus on being of the greatest service. This infuses our work with meaning and improves our performance. With the right strategies, true success. Anyways, yeah, let's just kind of go back to that kind of last thing here, because um, I've been thinking recently about kind of these motives of love and service, right? That kind of we want to permeate, we want to have permeate our lives, right? And there's this sort of attitude that, like this kind of alludes to, like I can put in this great effort to like love, and to care for other people, but I might not be getting the response that I want or hope for, right? And but there's kind of realization that that's okay, um, because I think this idea that meaning, um, and happiness and fulfillment that kind of happens in our life when we have these sorts of motives is something that kind of takes time. There's not this idea that like all of a sudden everything's perfect in my life because I have these motives of love and service necessarily. Um, but I think some of these things kind of take time to bear fruit and ripen. And so it's sort of like having that image of being a gardener or trying to kind of cultivate some sort of what's it called? Like yeah, cultivate a garden or cultivate. Sorry, I'm just sort of yeah, cultivate a garden or plant a tree that kind of bears fruit, you know. Um, and I have found this personally also super true, which is that when we're kind of focused on this idea of what am I going to be able to give rather than what am I able to get out of a situation or out of life, it improves our performance. I mean, one kind of small example of that, and I'll just finish this. I guess one small advantage of that, or example of that I've thought of recently in my own life is also kind of fitness or CrossFit related, because I was thinking about when I was first starting to do CrossFit, what are my motives? What am I trying to achieve, or what am I trying to get out of this, right? Um, and I wanted to kind of find a motive that I think would be meaningful to me, that would help keep me kind of going back to the gym. Because this was in a time when I was like trying to be more consistent going back to the gym. I was not super fit at the time, and I was just trying to get more, yeah, like I said, more consistent. And I tell people the story because I think it's super meaningful to me, which is I kind of asked myself, and I was super honest with myself, like, what is it that I'm trying to get out of fitness? What am I trying to get out of CrossFit or joining this gym, right? Um, and I think I was aware of a motive, which is like I want to look good, right? Or I think I want to look fit, or I want to look attractive to people. And again, I think there's all sorts of different types of motives, right? But that's necessarily not something that's like super deep. I don't think that's necessarily wicked or wrong to have kind of a motive to want to be attractive to someone. But I didn't think that that would be super meaningful for me in the long run. Um, and I could go into that more later. But and I think I had been seeing that motive in my mind in my life previously with going to the gym, and I'd found, hey, this is not super meaningful. It's also not very motivating, and I'm not really getting results. Right. So that kind of idea that there's this kind of continuum or this connection between your motives, your meaning, and the results, the outcomes that you want ultimately too. Right. Um, like this strategy, in other words, like this strategy of going to the gym so that I can look good is not working. Like I'm not actually going in that much. Um, and so I was thinking about like, well, what is the benefit of lifting weights? What's one benefit of lifting weights? Well, I'm stronger, right? Okay, well, what's good about being strong? What's the benefit of strength? Mm, you know, and then I remember thinking to myself, well, I want to be able to protect my family. Like I want to be able to like, if someone's like threatening someone I love, I want to be able to protect them from the danger of that person, um, in a fight or whatever it is, right? I want to be able to lift something heavy that's fallen on someone that I love, or someone that, or just a stranger on the road. And so this idea that, okay, actually there's an ideal here that I'm connecting my fitness, my working out, my all that stuff. And I think that that ideal was like protecting, being able to protect people that I love and that I care for. And all of a sudden, kind of this whole like, I remember it being like very transformative, right? All of a sudden, I was able to be super consistent going to the gym. What I'm trying to do is protect people. I want to be able to protect myself and the people I love. And that's why I'm like learning how to deadlift. And that's why I'm learning how to clean and jerk. And that's why I'm learning how to do all these complicated, crazy things that are making me fitter and making me stronger. And there's a community in the CrossFit gym that is able to kind of back me up and support me and give me the structure that's necessary in helping me to kind of achieve that goal, right? To protect people, to be able to protect people. And I think there's an extra kind of benefit here as an adaptive athlete too, or someone with like a physical disability or difference, which is, yeah, someone might like look at me and say, "Hey, I can take that one arm guy." Like, you know, um, he's like weaker or something like that, right? Um, and again, it's not necessarily about like uh, it's not necessarily about like what do I look like? Do I look threatening, or do I look like I can protect someone or take care of someone? But it's more about also like, am I actually capable of um, doing it? I guess I'm kind of losing my train of thought. It's getting time. But yeah. Anyways, long story short, that was kind of a very core early on motive that has kind of helped me to carry me through the last few years of CrossFit, and here we are, a official, I guess, CrossFit Games athlete, which is something that's funny to think about. Um, yeah, cool. Let's see. I don't know if there's anyone in the comments. Nope. Just one person lurking. I see you. I see you. Okay, cool. Anyways, happy Sunday. Once again, as Mark Wahlberg says, stay prayed up. And then he like makes the sign of the cross. I always think that's funny. Today's the feast day of Epiphany, also, by the way, in the Catholic Church, which is fun. The feast of the three kings, the three magi. And so I had a beautiful service here at my parish here in Alexandria. And it was awesome, beautiful, 10 out of 10. Cool. All right. Trident Wizard. Oh, yo, it's Trident Wizard. Let's go. How's it going? She decided to not lurk anymore. All right. Well, I hope you've found it super interesting or helpful. Yeah, good to see you. And good night, good luck, Godspeed, good. Good night, Godspeed, good luck. I forgot what I'm supposed to say, but you get the point.